Hello,
everybody.
Amanda. Hello, LesboPunk in Brazil. I've been so looking forward to speaking to you. This is really exciting.
It is very exciting. I'm so glad to be here today talking to you, Siobhan. Thank you so much for making your time available to talk to me.
It's a pleasure,
So,
absolute pleasure.
thanks again. So, I'm going to ask you a few questions about the documentary first that has been released this year. It is an amazing documentary. I had the privilege of seeing it, and I can say that it is incredible.
It was a great time and a terrible time to be young and queer.
So, let me ask you, Siobhan, how did this documentary come to life, and what role did you play in the creation of it?
Well, Amanda, so many years ago, back in the 1980s, I ran away from home when I was 16 or 17 and came from a small town in England to London. And at that time, believe it or not, London was empty. There were empty buildings everywhere. And so there were many, and the laws weren't as strong as they are now. And so there were many squatted tower blocks, squatted housing estates, just many. And so in a way, it was very easy for me to, we went to, me and my friend who'd had hitchhiked down with, went to what we call the Peace Centre in Islington. And we found a squat, and they showed me, they gave me a book full of empty squats, and I chose one, and we went off and we squatted. And from there, I met all of these punk lesbians. So first, some of them I met through living with them in squats, and some of them because we made clubs with them. And I knew at the time it was a really exciting thing that was happening. It felt really exciting. I knew we were like the first ones doing all of this, and we were. It wasn't an easy time to be gay. There was a lot of laws against it, and a lot of homophobia in the streets, and it was quite dangerous at times. But we sort of kind of liked that because it made us outsiders and made us all stick together and gave us a really close community. And it felt like there wasn't that many of us, but for this few hundred of us that there were, it felt like this really exciting time. Anyway, went on with my life as we do, and everybody else went on with their life. Another movement started, like Riot Girls, and then later all of the sort of queer activists that we have so much of today, and Ladyfest. And so I was often involved with these other scenes going on, but it was like nobody'd ever remembered our scene. And so sometimes I would say to my friends, we were, connected on Facebook and stuff, why hasn't anybody ever written a book about this, or even an article in the newspapers, and everyone would share photographs, and I'd say, well, it's such a shame that nobody else ever sees these photographs. Anyway, I wasn't a filmmaker, but I did like giving presentations. And so I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll collect the oral history and photographs, and I'll make like a presentation, and I'll tour it around the country. And that's what I did. And it was very popular, and we played at different festivals and different places around the UK. And then when I got back home, at the time I was living in Manchester in the UK, and I said to a friend who I'd met through the Ladyfests, actually, who was in a band, but I knew made films. And I said, would you record this? And we can put my speech up on, my presentation up on YouTube. Anyway, they came along to it, but they were more of a filmmaker, and they had to look at it. And they said, this isn't a YouTube film, Siobhan. This is a feature film. I thought, this is amazing. So then they got their friend Harry, and they're both non-binary queers, in bands, but also like making music, and quite a lot younger than me, about 20 years younger than me. So they said, oh yes, let's make a feature film. None of us had made a feature film before. I'd never made a film at all before. But they'd made some films, but just little short films or music videos for their bands and stuff. Anyway, so we started, and we'd never made a film before. So the first thing we did was went and recorded lots of interviews. So we did that really early, and we made like a short film, a 25-minute film fairly early. And we showed that at LGBT film festivals, and it always sold out, and everybody loved it. And I mean, they are absolutely brilliant filmmakers, Harry and Siobhan, and very funny. They're very good at finding the jokes and everything. So they made it. So then we knew we were onto something, and so we kept going. And it took us many years, mostly actually trying to get the funding to pay Harry and Siobhan to do the editing. So we got that money mostly by Kickstarters and doing events, and really so basically funded by the community who wanted to see the film. And it took us many years. And as we were going, we learned and learned more. In a way, it's good that it took us 7 years to make the film, because over those 7 years, we learned how to make films. We went to college. I went to film school. Harry went to animation school. Siobhan went and studied color grade at Pinewood Studios, a big studios in the UK. And so we got better as we went. And so by the time we ended, I have to say myself, I think also it's a very good film, with a really good story and really good fun. But it took us that amount of time. So I guess really, when people ever criticize my film, which people do, I say, well, make your own. It's not that difficult. We managed it. You know, if we've missed out your story, or we haven't told the story right, well, you tell us, you make a film. Because, I mean, if people want to see our film, people want to see your film too.
Of course. That is a fantastic answer, actually. I love it. So that is an amazing story of how the documentary came to life. And I also wanted to know, so how has the reception been so far where you guys have screened it?
Well, it's been wonderful. Sadly, we've had very few live screenings because of COVID. So, but very early on, so in about February, early in the year, we got a very good festival distributor who has a wonderful guy, a non-binary person, has done a wonderful job at getting it all around the world. So it's showing at festivals. It showed a lot of festivals in America, a lot in the UK. It's just playing in India at the moment, in Mumbai. It's playing in Ireland soon. It's played in LA, which we so wish we'd been there for. It was so exciting. Canada, Australia, and many more countries coming up in the near future. We've got a whole list of festivals, and some that have been announced and some that haven't yet. So yeah, we have shown it live once in London and once in Scotland, and both times, of course, it always sells out. And the audience really loves it. And the great thing is meeting everybody in the bar afterwards, because everybody wants to talk about it. Because not only do the older queers like myself enjoy it, because they see themselves, but also younger queers love it because it inspires them that there can be communities like that, and that you can do radical art and sex and music. And so now I think our biggest fan base is younger queers. Yeah, it speaks particularly, I think, to younger queers around the world, which is magic.
Definitely. I would say that as a young lesbian myself, a younger lesbian at least, it's definitely been very inspiring to see that. It makes me wish that we had more of that today, because things are very different today.
Things are very different today. Everywhere in the world, everything's very different.
Totally. And I'm so stoked to hear that it's already gone to so many different cities and countries, and it's been a great reception. You guys definitely deserve that. It's a great documentary. So you already told us a little bit about this, but let me ask you, what was the general atmosphere or context of the scene in which the Rebel Dykes started?
Yeah, so I think it is very important to know that there was a lot of homophobia. The 80s in the UK was a very difficult time, partly because of AIDS was a terrible scourge on the men at the time, but the homophobia bled into for the women and men. There were laws. They were making new laws against us in England at the time. But as I say, in some ways, living through it, having those laws, not AIDS, obviously AIDS is just horrendous, but having some of the difficulties that we had at the time brought us together and made us into like a family. I don't know what it's like in Brazil, But certainly at that time in England, if you came out to your mum and dad, generally they didn't want to know you after that. Often a few years later, many years later, everything was fine with your family. But at least initially, when people came out to their families, they'd have to leave home, and then they had quite a hard time off their mum and dad and family. And so most of us were very young. Certainly I left home at about 16, 17, but and that was the sort of age that a lot of the Rebel Dykes were, sort of between sort of 16 and 25, really quite young. And so our communities formed a family, and we lived together, and so work was quite difficult, because in those days, if you had funny coloured hair or tattoos or piercings, nobody else did. Now it's in the magazines and high fashion, but in those days it made you stand out, and so you couldn't really get work. So a lot of us would work in the sex industry, or some of the dykes would learn trades like carpentry or plumbing, so they could be self-employed, or we'd get money off the government to live. We were quite lucky, really, compared to most of the world, and even today. So yeah. I mean, I personally, I worked in the sex industry, in not just in the UK, but I did a lot of traveling. So in New York and Berlin and San Francisco. Yes, and there was a lot of us who used to work in various bits of the sex industry, really, just because it was a good way to earn money, and then there were a lot of us, so we could sort of stick together, and and we were young, and it was fun and stuff. Yeah. So so both I think, like you can see in the film, it was both a very difficult time, but also a very great, a good time for us, a great fun. Yeah.
I can definitely understand that. It does sound like it was very difficult, but also a very exciting time, a time full of new things. How close would you say that the Rebel Dykes as a group were to punk rock?
Yeah, well, certainly I came from, was a sort of, it was the same for me. I was a dyke at the same as a punk, sort of new wave 80s punk rather than the 70s punk. And it's funny thinking about punk in those days. Like nowadays, punk sort of is quite a fashion thing, and it means like beautiful hair, and but in those days, punk really meant buying secondhand clothes and turning them inside out and chopping them up and wearing and dyeing things yourself. So it was a very scruffy style, really, compared to the sort of high fashion punk today. And so in the squats that we went to, there was always a lot of punk gigs on. So yeah, and clubs where we'd put bands, and not necessarily punk as in punk music, the sort of thrash punk that we know, but more the punk ethos, like anyone can learn to play an instrument, anyone can, the sort of DIY thing. So the music might have been actually quite a wide variety of music, but all done with that sort of punk ethos that, I found a saxophone, then I'm a saxophonist and I'll be in a band, you know what I mean? Just like, so I think that sort of spirit of punk was the main thing, rather than following the Sex Pistols or something, that it was more like about, the spirit of anarchy, really, anarchism, and we can take power back and do what we want. So yeah, I think that it was a huge undercurrent in that period.
Okay, that's an awesome description. That's amazing. I love hearing from that, because I'm very big on punk rock myself, and it's amazing to hear from someone who was there and saw it in London in the 80s. It's just very mind-blowing. It's very exciting. Okay, so can you tell us one of your favorite stories from the 80s?
So I suppose the stories about the film is quite interesting, which is about a club that was set up called Chain Reaction. Right. So as I say, I used to work in the sex industry, working in peep shows, and so I'd been off traveling around New York and San Francisco, and I got back really where that story starts in the film, where these girls arrived from Finland and wanted to set up an S&M club, a BDSM club, or a fetish club for lesbians. And I suppose I was a bit in the background. I'm not one of the main characters in the film or in that scene. But I was very proud to say that I did the strip show on the first night. I think they asked me because they knew that I did that as a job. So that was quite an exciting thing. Yeah. So that was a real highlight. But there's lots of them. There's lots of them.
So, talking about current days, who are the Rebel Dykes today?
Well, it's so interesting, Amanda. Just as I was talking about our biggest fan base, really, are young dykes, I would say, and really young. Some of our fans we just went really big on TikTok, and so some of our fans are like, they contact us and say, I have to ask my dad if I can come, and are you able to come if you're not 18 yet, and all of this. And so I think there are Rebel Dykes today that are absolute, the youngsters who are finding it really inspiring in their own lives. And funnily enough, us, the older ones, we're probably least like it now. We have quite boring jobs or whatever, and, But so I definitely think it's something that we've handed it on to younger generations, and particularly for me, the sort of trans positive, the sort of non-binary, the sort of really alternatives, people who also have that DIY ethos of making their own bands and making their own art and making their own films. They are our Rebel Dykes. In fact, we've got an exhibition at the moment. It's just finishing in London. It's just got a few more weeks. An absolutely brilliant exhibition, if I say so myself. So the curators was that Kat Hudson, who's a younger dyke, and Atlanta, who was around at the same time as me, who's an artist. They did the curation of it, not me. I just did all the boring stuff in the background. But they're the curators, and I must say they've made an incredible job of it. But there's one piece in it it is on my Instagram, actually, if you look at Rebel Dykes. It's made by a woman called Emily Witham, and she got old pairs of leather trousers and sewed them together to make this huge banner, and with all the names of all the women in the film. And there's a lot of women in the film, as you know, and I don't know how she did it. She took ages, so much work. And then she put on it, descendant of a Rebel Dyke, and that just makes my heart sing. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. And second-hand leather trousers, how much more appropriate could it be? So
Definitely.
The artists, the queer artists and dreamers of today are the Rebel Dykes of today.
That's
and
lovely.
certainly I think of the word dykes to mean not just cis women, but also non-binary dykes or trans dykes, or and I think allies are just as welcome. For me, it's not about just a sort of women-only thing. It's about how we can band together. But I like the word dyke in particular because it does have a female thing to it, and queer. The word queer can be very overarching, and women can get lost in the word queer. So I like the word dyke because it takes a bit of that power back, really. Yeah,
I agree. I'm very fond of that word too. Okay, so my last question for you today, Siobhan, would be, what have you been up to lately regarding your projects with the Rebel Dykes, and what are your next plans for these projects?
Well, so we set up a little charity to go along with the film, and the aim of the charity is to create intergenerational debate and community, and so we built an archive, and we like to use that to inspire other artists. And we use it in lots and lots of different ways. So, of course, the film is the big one that hopefully will come to Brazil. But in addition, as I say, we've had this large exhibition with 50 artists from the 80s and 90s, and also very young artists from today responding to the archive. So that's nearly finished. That'll be just going on for a few more weeks. Other things that we've done, we do radical tours around London. So I'm going to be doing one of them on the 26th of September. And then when the film comes out in the UK anyway, we'll be doing events with the film, because I don't know about you, Amanda, but I think it's a film that's best watched with a gang of people.
Oh, for sure.
with an opportunity to think about it and talk about it afterwards. It's not like I don't think it's just like, you know, background stuff to watch on the TV. I think it's hopefully it's a film that prompts action, and so we're wanting to do events around it when it goes touring. And you know, it would be a dream to me to hear that if when it plays in other countries that sort of, I can't really arrange that because it's beyond my reach, but you know, when it goes to other countries, that people are inspired to put on events, you know, play the film with bands or whatever, just anything really to bring people together. And I think it's very important, if people do that, is to think about inviting older queers and younger queers, because often, I don't know about in Brazil, but often we don't have an opportunity to meet. And sometimes it causes, certainly in my culture, absolute masses and masses of misunderstandings and confusion and arguments really between the generations, which to me is really sad. So yeah, so one of the things I hope that people will do is that they'll take this Rebel Dyke label when it comes to their country, the film, and they'll do things around it themselves. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, my dream, I guess, is to be like what's happened between you, Rebel Dykes and LesboPunk, where we'll hit off each other and get excited and inspired by each other, and that it will grow into maybe a little bit of a global movement of queer Rebel
awesome.
Dykes. Yeah, you know, because it's very hard for queer women really to see themselves on screen or to see themselves at all ever, to be honest. It's like we don't exist in the world. And you know, if in my country, if there ever is a lesbian film, it's always very slushy and soft and kind of boring, and so people don't really see, that's not really who we are, you know. So
Yes.
yeah, so that's my dream, is that it's like I'm throwing seeds, and they'll who knows, that they'll bloom around the world. Certainly we'd love to come to Brazil, Amanda. How can we come to Brazil? How can we come to Brazil?
That's a question that I have for anyone who's watching this video right now. Okay, guys, so here's the deal. I bet that everyone who's watching this is as excited as I am to see this film here in Brazil eventually. I totally agree with Siobhan. It would be amazing if we had a global movement for this. And not only that, to bring that here to Brazil, where we have so little of these contents, right? Especially in the punk scene, especially in the dyke scene, especially in the queer scene in general. So please, if you have any information or any way to help us on bringing this documentary here to Brazil, do not hesitate to contact any of us here in this video right now. The links for the Rebel Dykes website will be available, and the link for LesboPunk, my zine as well, will be available in the description of this video. Please do not hesitate to contact us if you can help.
Yes, totally. We played all over the world. Why haven't we come to Brazil yet? Why haven't we come to
we need to bring them to Brazil, guys.
So there must be a festival there that wants us. Come on.
We'll definitely find something, I'm sure.
So that's it, I guess. Lovely to speak to you, Amanda.
Oh, definitely the same for me. It's always a joy to speak to you, Siobhan.
Always. You're so inspiring.
You are a lovely person. Thank you so much for taking your time to talk to me today. This has been so much fun for me, hearing from you, hearing from your firsthand experience. And who knows, I hope we can do more things like this in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks everyone who has been watching us so far, and we expect to hear from you soon in regards to bringing this documentary all across the world.
And then if there's and of course I'm speaking to Brazil, but if I'm speaking to anyone else, I want you to see LesboPunk zine. There's a new edition coming out soon. I'm dying to see it. I always love everything that Amanda does, so I'm dying to see the next episode, the next copy of it.
The Portuguese version is already available. The English version will be available soon worldwide for free, as always.
As always.
Okay, well, thanks again, Siobhan. Talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.